Hello and welcome to In Conversation With, the monthly podcast series brought to you by the team behind the Global Cosmetics newsfeed. This year, we're exploring innovating cosmetics. And in today's episode, we're turning our focus to one of the fastest growing categories in beauty and personal care, the teen market. I'm your host, Siobhan Murphy. There's a lot of buzz around the Sephora Kids phenomenon, but the real growth in the teen market is happening in personal care. The category is currently valued at around 25 billion US dollars and is expected to reach an estimated 33 billion by 2028. This growth is driven by rising disposable incomes among teenagers in developing economies, as well as the increasing influence of social media and digital marketing. So the big question is, how can the industry meet the demands of a growing and highly engaged consumer segment while also protecting young, developing skin? To help me unpack this and more, I'm joined by this month's expert panel. Welcome back to Mallory Huron, Director of Beauty and Wellness at Future Snoops, Reena Hammer, co-founder of Indu, and Dr. Carol Treasure, founder and CEO of Accelerate. Welcome, everybody. Mallory, let's start with you. At Future Snoops, what key consumer shifts are you tracking in the teenage space, and where do you see the biggest opportunities for innovation?
This is, as your opening described, this is a very interesting and dynamic market. And quite frankly, what's happening in this market landscape is evolving as quickly as this demographic is growing up and moving from their early tween years to middle tween to proper teenager. Their wants and needs are shifting as they mature. And so the beauty industry is just struggling to catch up and to keep up. I think right now, some of the key opportunities that we're seeing in terms of the brand response to this incredibly influential demographic, a demographic that, by the way, is very interested in luxury goods. Not something that I could say for myself when I was a tween, but we know statistically 57% of Gen Z beauty consumers are interested in buying high end luxury products. So, this is a generation with a lot of disposable income and they see all these things on social media and they want to have the same products as these affluent influencers. So I think one of the things we identified, and we recently did a report on Gen Zalpha, which if any listener has not heard that term, Zalpha loosely refers to Gen Z and Alpha, like that in between, but this also broadly refers to Gen Alpha as well. So some of the key opportunities are definitely showing up in good faith to support age-appropriate beauty rituals. We all remember what happened with the initial Sephora tween phenomenon, and we had 11, 10, 9 year olds even putting retinoids and harsh exfoliating acids on their skin, which is very harmful for young developing skin. Sometimes that hasn't even gone through the changes of puberty yet, and so it can really disrupt the skin barrier. I also think that there's an amazing opportunity to reach these young consumers through creative and viral marketing moments. We know this is a generation that lives online, and so I think they want brands to meet them where they are. And they want beauty that's fun and gamified. We'll probably talk more in the rest of the podcast, but something we're seeing that's really big is the gamification and the toyification of beauty. And everything is a toy and everything is play. And that's fun for the consumer, but it's also fun for brands to experiment with as well. Another major opportunity we're seeing is involving these consumers in the product creation process, asking them what they want, crowdsourcing products from them, getting input from parents as well. I think we've seen several brands that have taken this route and they've been successful. It's sometimes it doesn't always pan out, but essentially it gives you the opportunity to give this very fickle demographic exactly what they want. So I think definitely the most pressing ethical dilemma is to make sure that you are, to my first point, proceeding in good faith and not creating products that are meant to take advantage of insecurities that are common to this age group as everyone grows through the same growing pains and making sure that we create products that are gentle.
Indeed. And Reena, how are these changing consumer preferences influencing your MPD strategy at Indu?
One of the things we do, which Mallory just described, is we talk to teenagers on a constant daily basis. So it was the first thing that we did before we had a product, before we had anything. We just literally had a brand name. And for us, it was super vital to make sure that they were on this journey with us. We've all gone through it, but we forget a lot and a lot changes. Teenagers today are not how we grew up. The world has changed drastically. So for us, having them as part of the team, as part of the journey is essential. I think, to be fair, you could use that in any context, but I think especially with this environment and this age group. What we've heard from them is they're often forgotten and they're discarded. They're in this weird limbo phase. No one quite takes them seriously, but they're incredible. They have amazing creativity, great ideas. And so ultimately, they have to enjoy using the product. They have to want to use the product. And so for us to not include them just seemed madness. So, from an NPD strategy perspective, we have a committee of teenagers who are all kind of product junkies, but they get to have their voices heard. They grow in confidence. They say, I like this texture, I like this smell, or this is a problem that I have, I would love you to solve, and I don't quite know how. And by them just feeling heard, it makes the whole MPD product process for us, it's so insightful, and we're not just churning things out. It has to be there for a purpose and it has to solve a problem to them, not one that we've created in our heads. So the first thing we ever do before we even brief a manufacturer is talk to teenagers and figure out what it is they want and they need, and then we build it up from there. So for me, that's the most important part and how they inform everything that we do from an NPD perspective.
And Carol, at Accelerate, how are these shifts guiding your team in developing innovating testing methods for teenage skin?
Yvonne, echo what the other guests have said just now. Uh, I think that some of the consumer trends really are not so much trends as we may like to think when it comes to teens, because if we think about the biology of teenage skin, that doesn't change. And there are specific changes that the teenagers are going through, like the hormonal changes, the increase in sebum production on the skin and the scalp, the increase in sweat, which then leads to those sort of social concerns around body odor, etc., and feeds into that kind of self-esteem topic for teenagers. So some of those things are really fundamental that was the same when we were teenagers. It hasn't gone away. But the difference now is that we've overlaid on that a much greater consumer awareness and education about products that are already here and products that are missing that this generation want to see. So I think that there's definitely much more sophistication out there in terms of the awareness. I would also say that it goes beyond the product itself and goes to the values behind the product. And many of the brands that we're testing for Accelerate know that their teenage consumers are very clued up and they do care about the environment. They do care about issues like animal testing and cruelty free and vegan products. And I think that the social media, the fact that everybody is living online now means that there really is nowhere to hide in terms of the ethics or the science. And for me, I think one of the things that is key here is transparency. You know, teens know when they have it being misled, they're very savvy, they know what's authentic, they know what's transparent. And I think that it's just about making sure that they are heard, they are respected. And I think there are opportunities that to provide them with products that have been tested in a way that is going to address the safety and the efficacy of the product, but also sharing about how that was tested and how animals weren't used, how it was tested in a cruelty-free way. And it's actually an educational opportunity as well to look at the science behind the products and the testing.
And thinking about that, Mallory, what tech driven innovations are you seeing in this category and how are they shaping the future of product development for teenage skin?
Certainly, in terms of tech, this is where the second wave, so to speak, of K Korean beauty is influencing this burgeoning generation because we've seen a lot of interest from teens, especially on TikTok, in terms of daily beauty devices, be it a sonic pore or nose scraper, be it the Medicube style facial rejuvenators, which again, it's very disconcerting that 12, 13, 14-year-olds feel they have a need for a product that stimulates muscle development and prevents aging, but that's a different topic. But they're very interested in devices and using devices to optimize topical products and to complement topical products. We also know that face massage devices, scalp massage devices are very popular, as well as gua sha devices as well. So I think, and this is all mainly coming from Korea, which is the focus of a lot of beauty attention right now on social media. And so I think they're looking to this market and they're seeing these advanced devices and they're very interested. So I think that's one part of the tech conversation when it comes to Gen Z Alpha. I think another part of the tech conversation is certainly, of course, AI integration, algorithmic recommendations. The idea of the personalized algorithm driven product is more of a something associated with millennials, really, the whole pros driven phenomenon. However, I think that certainly when you're dealing with a generation who is new to self care, skincare, and they get a lot of their education and clarification on product use on TikTok, I think there's a huge opportunity for tech developers to create systems that will recommend age appropriate products for teens. And so I think there's a huge opportunity there, as well as in terms of different algorithms and systems that help filter out harmful messaging. I know in terms of social media development, there's a lot of call for platforms that are teen safe. This is a continuing and ongoing discussion. It's been happening for the last 30 years, quite frankly. So it's something that I think we're going to see evolve, especially as we enter into this era where there's real questions being asked about what is appropriate for them to consume in terms of self-image on the internet.
And Reena, are there any specific technologies influencing how you formulate or package your products at Indu?
I think from our perspective, we are always looking to be innovative. We don't want to just put something out on the market that somebody else has done. But at the same time, it's about simple principles that really work on this type of young, delicate skin. So sometimes lots of people do innovation for innovation's sake. And actually, there are ways that we would probably rather innovate than just with product. So it might be in how it is actually dispensed, or one of the things we did, I want to say just before Rode, but Rode was the one that took off, was we had a clippable lip gloss that they could put to their phone cases. So sometimes it's innovation in that sense. It's the fun and the enjoyment and the use of the product rather than a specific formulation based kind of technology. But I think you've got to keep it interesting in terms of them wanting to use it, because I think that's what we've seen a lot of. There's lots of fantastic product out there, but sometimes it's just not appealing to them because of this, the way it's packaged. And we also don't want to go down this road of overly sugarcoating and trying to, in our perspective, we're not very pro 15-step routines. We want to keep it simple for this delicate skin. It needs to work. So from that perspective, our standpoint is very much around what does the skin need? And let's not faff around and put extra stuff in there for the sake of it. But obviously, if there's something that comes along innovation or technology wise that is absolutely perfect for teen skin, we would run with that.
And Carol, what technical advancements are shaping how you test teenage skincare products at Accelerate?
Well, I would say that coming back to the previous question, really, and thinking about how teenage skin is so sensitive, it really needs to be looked after and not overdone in terms of a lot of active ingredients. And so we're finding that one of the main tests that we're doing at Accelerate for products aimed at teens is simply for skin gentleness, skin mildness, and making sure that regardless of any exciting new ingredients that have gone into those formulations, they are still fundamentally going to be gentle on that sensitive skin. And I think that is really important to teens and their families and plays into those sort of social needs as well, to make sure that the skin remains clear, it's not getting red by using products that are too harsh. I do think that there is a rather obsessive use, as we know, among young people of products that are aimed for adults. And so I think that there is room to even consider this in terms of safety assessment for products that are aimed at adults, knowing that they are often misused, they're not used as directed, and we should be taking into account younger skin when we're assessing products aimed at adults as well, to make sure that we've got those margins of safety built in. We are also seeing a number of devices that we're testing, and some of the device technology, it has an interesting overlap with medical devices designed for wound healing, for example, and some of that learning is being carried over into cosmetic devices. So that's a nice synergy between sectors. Something else we're testing for is a use of multiple products together. Again, safety assessments tend to be traditionally looking at what happens when you use one product. None of us use just one product, and teens in particular perhaps are going to be using a whole variety of products on their skin day to day. Some of the more elegant studies that we're doing in vitro is looking at the synergy between different ingredients and different formulations. So I think they're the main things. We are developing in vitro skin models now to look at diverse populations. Traditionally, the skin models have been very much based on male Caucasian skin, sometimes female, but depending on the donors of cells. But it's really important that we can reflect all types of skin in the in vitro models that we're using.
Just shifting subject slightly, Mallory, how important is sustainability in driving innovation within the teenage product space?
Again, greenwashing has taken its toll, but green beauty was the new standard. You couldn't not have all vegan formulas. You couldn't not have any of these things. And we know that sustainability is extremely important for Gen Alpha. However, sometimes, as we know from Gen Z and Gen Alpha, what consumers say they want and what they buy can have conflicting interpretations. We know that both of these generations, speaking mainly to the Gens Alpha, the true teenagers right now, they are very interested in sustainability. They support sustainable measures. They are the generations that will suffer the most from lack of sustainable action. However, we know that they continue to buy products that are incredibly unsustainable and support plastic packaging. Hyper consumerism is a huge component of these generations. There's a lot of rampant consumption for consumption's sake, which is not sustainable at all. And so it's tricky from an analysis perspective to understand what this generation wants. But I think the main takeaway in terms of sustainability from a cultural perspective is this generation is not a monolith. There are many subsections to this generation. There are the eco warriors within this generation that are very strident about their sustainable needs when it comes to product. And there also is the essential truth that two things can be true at the same time. 15-year-olds can deeply care about the environment and believe in sustainable action, but they might not have the wherewithal or funds to buy extremely sustainable products in fully sustainable packaging. However, that said, there are so many amazing brands that are up and coming to help address this need. Because if it takes too much research to find a product that's truly sustainable, a 14-year-old is likely not going to find it. So we've seen so much innovation in the market from brands that are doing all the hard work, already laying down the ground for teens to find products that are not only safe for them to use, but also tick all of those sustainable boxes as well. So it's a really interesting area to explore from a cultural perspective.
And Reena, what role does sustainability play in Indu's innovation pipeline? And what are the challenges in delivering on those commitments?
So, absolutely, it's an important pillar. We know in the same way by asking teenagers, is it important to you? And it absolutely is. The one thing we have heard, or when we've said, what does that actually mean in a practical sense? we've heard refills was their first kind of give me a hard example. And hence, most of our skincare is refillable. We have, I think, as most brands nowadays know, that they find it very hard for anyone who doesn't want to do right by our planet. So it's generally what everybody wants to do and we should be doing. But there are obviously limitations and it will only get better as time goes on. So we've been very transparent. So I think that's really important to say, look, we have a kind of 3R principle where we want to have everything recycled or recyclable, made from recycled materials and refillable. But at the moment, everything meets 2 out of 3, and about 40 or 50% makes 3 out of 3. And that is a kind of ongoing pledge that we have, basically. And I think for us, it's making sure that it is communicated clearly but simply. And also, sometimes refills can be a bit of a faff. But again, we found it in a really simple way of doing it, because you have to come back to that mindset. A 14-year-old, a 13-year-old needs to get it. They need to be able to do it. And it's not some weird click pop and I'll never do it and I'll never take it down the road. Or all of that has to be in a simple enough way to actually action the sustainable kind of cause. So for us, again, it goes back to them telling us what's important. We know that it is, and how can we bring it into the brand as much as possible. Our kind of second phase of the mantra is trying to take it beyond just product, but how we can do that in even the community meetups that we have, in the social and the content creation that we have, not just create cool content and use crap cups and bad things in it. Let's actually look at what image we're portraying as well, in terms of how we, or how the brand Indu lives. So there's a lot more we can be doing, everybody can be doing, but I think it's about the honesty and doing our best and trying and striving for better.
And Carol, how do sustainability principles influence the way you test products designed for teenage skin at Accelerate?
What we're hearing from the companies that we're working with in the cosmetics industry is that really just any age group, the responsibility for sustainability really is a shared one. And so consumers of any age need to be prepared to make an impact with their buying choices and making sure that they are buying in line with their values and supporting the companies that they really feel they can get behind. But I'm just thinking about a talk that I listened to recently from Chris Packham, who I find very inspirational. And he was saying, we all have to do what we can, but ultimately, it's not your fault. Don't feel guilty. And in this context, it really, I think, shines a light on the fact that the industry really needs to take that primary responsibility. So, yes, it comes from the consumer side. The industry really needs to make sure that it's sorting its act out in terms of the product, the packaging. We don't want to be growing large scale crops for cosmetics that are taking up land, that are impacting biodiversity. And there are some companies that are really leading the way here. Lush, for example, who, as we know, are very big with the teen age group, they have undertaken so many initiatives over the years working with small scale businesses globally, from family farms and communities in remote areas, and just working hand in hand with them to make sure those sustainability principles are adhered to. And what I like about that example is that Lush are very good at telling a story. So they will very much share very transparently the story behind the ingredient, the story behind the product, the story behind the people who are involved all around the world in bringing that product to them. And I think that really captures the imagination of this generation. And then I think when people understand and connect with hearts and minds, then they're more likely to make those buying choices that are going to support sustainability.
And Mallory, thinking about industry responsibility, how are the evolving regulations affecting product development and innovation in the teen market?
This is really the meat of this conversation, I think. The idea of how can we keep this demographic safe? How can we prevent undue harm from social media messaging, as well as the physical harm from products that are not suited towards developing teenage skin? And whose responsibility is it to prevent this harm? It's such a multifaceted conversation, and it's one that a lot of organizations are trying to sort out. For example, Sweden recently, as well as the state of California in the US, have begun enacting measures to prevent the sale of anti aging products to children. So things like retinol, for example, retinol being the big one that's being called out. And there's also considerations about safeguards and guardrails for social media platforms, what can and can't be shown to teens. It's an incredibly complex issue, and I think in waiting for regulations from governments and social media companies is not going to be the way to protect these consumers. I think, unfortunately, it is in the hands of individual brands to proceed in good faith. It would be nice to see brands come together in a sort of coalition and create initiatives to spread the word about safe product use. But I think until then, it's time for brands to take individual responsibility and through their brand communication, put out a positive message to the consumer base. I think we all saw what happened with Drunk Elephant's missteps in the early days of the Sephora tween phenomenon when they were talking about how many of their products were safe for young children to use, which raised many eyebrows because the products that they were claiming were safe were decidedly harsh actives. And I think that we've come to find out that has hurt them quite a bit. So I think it behooves brands to act responsibly. I think parents certainly take notice of who is taking advantage of their children and who is not. So strong brand communication and speak to these teens, as was discussed earlier in this call. Teens are vulnerable, but they also listen. They're looking for guidance. As all generations of teens before this generation, they're simply trying to find their place in the world and discover who they are. And a brand can be a positive and proactive influence by telling them you don't have to follow every trend. You don't have to do this. You don't have to do that just because you saw it on TikTok. Here's how your skin actually functions. Here's what your skin needs in this moment. And here are the products that you can use if you have a little acne or if you're going out in the sun, what have you. So I think brand communication and education, speaking to both parents and teens, is going to be the way forward in terms of any semblance of regulation at this moment.
Mm. So, thinking about the complex issue, Reena, how does Indu navigate changing safety and compliance standards?
So we've got to be on it the whole time because things change all the time. We have a huge part of our team is based on that. And I think as a business, every single team member, and this is something I'm very proud of, is we have this kind of collective responsibility. We walk in, it's not just a job. We have a feeling of a duty of care, and that this is something that was lacking when we were younger, and we want to do right by this age group. So it's something that runs through our blood every day. So when we're posting something or we're thinking about it, we're thinking, oh, actually, is that too much? Is that this? Is this educational enough? Has this been described well enough? It's across all fronts of the business. Yes, from formulation and regulation and testing and all of those really super important elements, but also just our general behaviors and being responsible. We talk a lot about a collective responsibility. It's something that I feel very strongly about because it's very easy to say, oh, it's parents who need to do the job. Oh, it's brands who need to do the job. Oh, it's media who needs to do the job. No, it's government who needs to do it. It's absolutely every single person needs to appreciate that these are young people and it's our job to act responsibly as a collective. And I think that's often where, not naming any brands, but they jump on a bandwagon and they're like, yeah, great, young consumers, let's just sell them this in nice, pretty packaging. And a lot of the time when you blame parents as well, they're not in this industry. They don't know. They need help. They need education. And we know how hard it is sometimes when you have a strong-willed teenager who just says, no, mum, I don't know what you're talking about. And all it takes is somebody else to say the exact same thing and they'll listen. It really does need to be a collective piece, but a constant evaluation on just doing right and being better. So I think that's our approach to it.
And Carol, does Accelerate adapt its testing protocols to meet evolving regulatory standards in teenage skin?
It's certainly a topic of conversation quite regularly with our client companies. And I think that if we just think about the regulatory framework that we're operating in at the moment, it feels really important that safety assessments are done very much with the end in mind and not just a tick box exercise. We know that the quality of those safety assessments does vary considerably. And I think it's so important to consider, as I said before, actually, that teens are not only using products that are designed for teens and say on the package that they're for teens, they're using products that are destined for adults. And I think that we just need to be very aware of that and building in some of those margins of safety and taking that responsibility when we're doing the safety assessments as an industry. That's in terms of safety. We know that much more data is now needed for claim support by global regulators. So it's not just safety, it's claim support as well. And that advertising authorities around the world are asking for scientific proof about the claims that are being made, which is definitely a good thing in terms of transparency. We're definitely seeing a lot more interest in that, that companies are looking to back up all the claims they're making with solid scientific evidence. And often just being able to do that in vitro before the clinical trials helps to limit the risk in those clinical trials and to provide data that can be quite useful for brands from a marketing perspective as well. And then I'd say that just one last point is that we need to get really clear, much clearer than we are now, about that blurred boundary between cosmetics and then healthcare products. We are seeing increasingly at cosmetic conferences and events talking about things like acne, psoriasis, how are we going to improve these conditions? And then there's that regulatory confusion, which varies from one global region to another. What's a cosmetic? What's a medical device? What's a healthcare product? So I think that it is critically important for brands to be very much aware of where their product sits within that and how it might vary among different global markets. So, very important to get that regulatory advice alongside any testing that's being done.
I think that's good advice, Carol. And let's end on an inspiring note. Mallory, which recent innovation is the teenage category excites you the most and why?
Ooh, there are so many good ones. Let's see. To pick a few, I think something that's exciting me are definitely the elevated sun protection options for tweens and teens right now. We know that we're in a kind of troubling space for or troubling time at this exact moment for sun safety. There's a lot of misinformation out there, and we've seen this new rise of tanning without sun protection. However, on the positive note that we want to end on, there are so many amazing brands that are introducing age appropriate, easy to use, fun, colorful brand options and product options for tweens that really instill this healthy habit early. We know the earlier that consumers start using sun care and sun safety, the better. And so brands like Pippa Skincare, Attitude, these are just some examples. There are also so many amazing examples coming out of Korea and Japan that are making this easy breezy for tweens. Another area that I really think is one of the few positives when I think of when I was a tween and also growing up today, this is an area where I think tweens definitely have it better today is acne care. The options were very limited 20 years ago, but now there are so many brands that take the shame and stigma out of acne and early onset acne, make it fun, use gamification, use amazing brand communication and education. We know that pimple patches have become a sort of status symbol and accessory in and of themselves. And so these brands are really busting stigmas and they're making it a lot more efficient and also fun. Simply the formulation technology has massively grown in the last several decades. So I think that is definitely a positive. Also, another positive for tweens is that they no longer have to take these artificially flavored, chalky, giant multivitamins that are like I grew up with. We've seen amazing, sophisticated, elevated options for supplements for tweens. We know that tweens want to mirror the supplements and the vitamins that they see adults taking, but of course, this is extremely important to only formulate things that will be safe for kids to use. And so we've seen amazing options here as well. The list goes on and on. Nail care as well is a really fun area that we've seen for tweens, as well as for products that focus on tween boys and really trying to instill healthy self care habits in the next generation of male consumers. We know that it's incredibly vulnerable to deal with bodily changes at that age, but tackling them without shame and stigma and creating a self love routine will do wonders for self confidence going forward. So I think there is a lot of bright spots on the horizon for product development for this generation.
Indeed. And Reena, is there a breakthrough or a trend that's inspiring you right now?
Oh, very good question. That's inspiring. I think just talking to this age group, that's the biggest change, I think, in my way of working from any other brand or kind of situation I've been in before. They are so inspiring. So just literally having my ears open and them coming and saying, "Oh, have you seen this?" There's so much we don't know and so much that they do. That for me is the most inspiring thing, is just literally keeping my mouth shut actually and just hearing their ideas, whether it is about physical experiences and pop-ups or how products should be presented, textures, smells, content creation, names, fun, cool ways to talk about things. For me, they are the most inspiring thing. And making sure that dialogue keeps happening. And it's not just a startup thing, it's a consistent piece. But for me, they are the ones. And when we've not that recently, but a year ago, we launched an SPF that is obviously now taking off massively. And it took us 3 years to get the formulation right for all of their needs. The no white cast, they wanted it to be super lightweight, all of those things. But in actually the marketing and the presentation of the product, it's them who are saying, "Oh, we look on our iPhones and we understand what the UV index is every day." It's how language is developing and evolving. And there are words that they use on a daily basis that I'm learning, and what's cool changes, and you don't say certain things anymore, certain emojis are in or out. So for me, that constant conversation is the most inspiring piece. It's about staying connected to the people you're trying to serve. And I think that's what inspires me most.
Lovely. And Carol, what innovation in teenage skincare do you find especially exciting and why?
I would agree. There's so many exciting innovations at the moment around the marketing and the packaging and the messaging. But in terms of the products themselves, I do may sound boring, but I think that the fundamental health aspects are still really important. And I read a statistic recently, something like 80% of people in general don't wash their hands before they apply their skincare regime. And so for teens, this can be a particular problem because then they're getting more bacteria onto the skin, which can lead to more spots, etc. So one of the products that I saw recently that I liked is a Sam Farmer product where he's actually built in a fingertip gel and moisturizer into a spot kit. So they don't need to worry about going to wash their hands. They can just use this special little part of the kit, first of all, to sanitize and moisturize the fingertip, and then to apply a hydrocolloid patch to the spot, which then stays on overnight. So, there again, we've got that overlap that I talked about before with medical devices. These hydrocolloids have been used for a long time in terms of wound healing in the healthcare area, and now they're being applied for spot treatment overnight. That's a vegan product as well, so I always like to see cruelty-free and vegan coming to the fore.
So interesting. A huge thank you to Mallory, Reena, and Carol for joining me today. And thank you to our listeners for tuning in to In Conversation with. We will be back next month with more insights as we continue our Innovating Cosmetics series. Until then, take care and stay inspired.